here in New York, a social policy and advocacy organization. How you doing, Jennifer?
Thank you.
We were talking with Mayor Pat, obviously, about the Jeff Sessions controversy and clearly about the HBCU, the proclamation by President Trump this week, the meeting that he had with the HBCU presidents. And one of the things that was said coming out of there, the Education Secretary Betsy DeVos said that one of the original pioneers, rather, of pro-choice education was historic black colleges, which I and others immediately jumped on as factually preposterous because black colleges was formed because we had no choice, not that we chose a certain type of education. But let me, before we get into the HBCU things, from a policy standpoint, because I get a lot of callers about this, and I don't think that people really understand what is the difference between public schools, charter schools, and vouchers, so that when we talk about pro-choice, that people can choose between their kids going to a public school as opposed to a charter school or as opposed to using a voucher. What is the difference in the types of educational options? What is the difference in the types of education? And what is the amount of people percentage-wise can be covered by these options?
Okay. So, by matter of right, by law, the government has to provide a public school education for residents and citizens in states across America, cities across America.
By law?
By law.
They have to give public education give education to every youngster.
Right.
Okay.
First through 12th grade. Going back about maybe 40 or 50 years, certain states then started saying it had to be kindergarten. And now we have in some jurisdictions, like here in New York, kids are, by right, if you are 4 in New York City, you can have a universal pre-kindergarten education. That is not yet established firmly as the law, but it is a decision that here in New York City Mayor de Blasio made. But across the nation, at a minimum, 1st through 12th grade by law. Public school is funded by the government. It's funded at both the city-state, at the city-state and federal levels. The federal government puts funding into education. It's discretionary dollars, meaning that it's not a fixed sum like a mandated sum of money, but it falls under discretionary spending. So it can go up, it can go down. It's not definitively set. State taxes and local taxes help to fund public school education at the city and at the state level. I'm going to use New York as an example in terms of the actual funding. And I'll use New York City. Here in New York City, the New York City Department of Education funds education to the tune of about $20,000 per student. Now that is a combination of city, state, and federal funds that come together to create that $20,000 pot per child. In Detroit, Michigan, it's about $9,000 per student. Let's talk a little bit about charter versus public versus voucher/private school. So the public schools exist throughout the country. As you walk down blocks, you see big public school buildings that have been erected, and kids have been going to them for decades. Charter schools are, what people don't know is that charter schools actually are public schools, but they are alternative public schools. They were created beginning back, I think, as early as maybe the late 90s here in New York. And New York was one of the first states to have charter schools. They are alternative public schools where students go to them by choice. And what that means is parents usually participate in a lottery to have their children be accepted into the schools. Charter schools are different from traditional public schools in that they are not controlled by the unions, if you will, meaning that if you want to hire or fire a teacher in a charter school, you do not have to go through the union process. if you want to hire or fire a principal, you don't have to go through the union to do that. Their funding, they get the same level of funding per pupil. So here in New York, if it's $20,000 that the traditional public schools get per student, the charter school gets that as well. However, charter schools don't have the same structure, those school buildings that the traditional public schools have. So often they have additional expenses because they've got to figure out where they're going to house their kids. Sometimes they get to house them in traditional public schools that have been closed down. Sometimes they have to create new sites. Charter schools get to have different hours and did school programs throughout the summer, and and they have an extended day. They get to set their curriculum. Traditional public schools. They have more flexibility. Now, vouchers can be used for private religious parochial schools. And what happens with vouchers is you get the amount of money, you can get up to the amount of money that the school that a traditional per pupil student allocation would be. So let's say here in New York, if it's $20,000 per child, you could what we're talking about is you get a voucher for as much as $20,000, and then you get to go and apply that to a private school program. Well, here in New York, private schools cost as much as $45,000 a year per child. So when President Trump and Secretary DeVos say that we're going to move towards a voucher, it's kind of deceiving, because if private schools here in New York City, just again using New York City as an example, if private schools cost $45,000 and you tell me I can take my $20,000 and go anywhere I want, and I think I'm going to get my child in one of these high-performing, private schools in New York City, as a person with low income, I still got to find that other $25,000.
Right.
So it doesn't really work to my advantage. The short of it is that we have different types of schools to provide different educations and different experiences. But if they are, the charter school isn't just by fact of being a charter school a better school. Research has shown that only 17% of charter schools in the nation are performing better than traditional charter schools, than traditional public schools. So 70%.